Welcome to the Privacy Report. We are living in this really interesting moment where the promise of AI is just massive, right? These incredibly powerful tools are everywhere,
Uh-uh.
but they're colliding head on with this fundamental sacrifice we're all being asked to make, our digital privacy. Every prompt, every document we upload, it feels like a trade-off.
And it's a trade-off that often happens in the dark. We're basically just relying on a vendor's promise that they'll handle our data properly.
Yeah.
And if you're dealing with anything sensitive, well, that's a pretty fragile foundation to build on.
That's the exact tension we're tackling today, because there is a path forward that offers both the convenience of AI and really robust privacy, and that path is local-only AI.
Right.
So our mission here is to unpack what that actually means, how it shifts control back to you, the user, and why it might be one of the most practical security moves you can make.
It's really about shifting from relying on this big, opaque external system to
Yeah.
one where you have transparent internal control.
And before we jump in, just a quick reminder that you can subscribe to our email newsletter for more insights like this over at theprivacyreport.net.
Okay, so let's get started. When we say local-only AI, what exactly are we talking about? Because I think most people still picture some giant server farm in the cloud.
Yeah, that's the common image, but local-only AI is, it's actually simple in concept. It just means running the AI models directly on a device that you control.
So my laptop, my phone.
Exactly. Your laptop, your phone, or maybe a server you set up yourself in your office. The critical difference is that your data never leaves your local environment.
Okay, so if the data stays put, that's where the privacy win immediately kicks in. You cut out the transmission risk entirely.
Precisely. Your data doesn't have to go over the public internet to some third-party server. So you immediately shrink the attack surface. You stop third-party data harvesting, and you maintain a clear chain of custody. And this isn't just theory anymore.
Right.
Optimized models have made this surprisingly doable on normal consumer hardware. But let's push back on that a bit. Why should I, as a regular user, be so distrustful of the big cloud vendors? I mean, they have multi-billion-dollar security budgets. Isn't that safer than me trying to secure my own laptop?
That's the key question, isn't it? But the risk isn't just about a firewall getting breached. It's about a lack of transparency and control.
Okay.
Most cloud AI systems, they collect your prompts, your logs, metadata. And when a vendor says they'll anonymize or delete it, you have absolutely no way to independently verify that. You have no idea which employee has access or what their data retention really is.
And I've seen that firsthand. I remember typing a very specific kind of sensitive question into a cloud tool late one night, and the very next day, I get an ad for a product directly related to it. That immediate feedback loop is just unnerving.
It is. And local AI kills that metadata harvesting completely because you control everything. Think about it in a high-stakes scenario, like a lawyer uploading a sensitive memo about a merger for summarization. Even if the vendor swears they'll delete it, there's always a risk of accidental data retention in some backup log, for months longer than their policy says.
So local-only AI completely flips that power dynamic. Instead of trusting this black box, you're the one who decides what's processed, stored, or deleted.
Exactly. And for professionals, lawyers, doctors, journalists, engineers, that level of verifiable control isn't just a preference. It's absolutely essential for compliance and for trust.
Okay, we've established the privacy angle, which is huge.
Yeah.
But let's be brutally honest, security is non-negotiable. What actual security doors are we slamming shut when we move from the cloud to our own machine?
We eliminate entire classes of vulnerability the moment your data doesn't have to travel over the internet to some massive external data center. You just sidestep a whole range of man-in-the-middle attacks and server-side vulnerabilities.
That makes a lot of sense. What about the risks inside the cloud provider itself?
That's where it gets really serious, especially for organizations. By keeping it local, you eliminate risks like misuse by vendor employees. But the big technical risk we get rid of is something called cross-tenant leakage.
Cross-tenant leakage. That sounds highly technical. Can you break that down? Why does that matter?
Yeah, it's the risk that data could bleed between different user accounts in a shared cloud system. So imagine you're that lawyer again, submitting a confidential brief.
Okay.
That brief is being processed on the same hardware as hundreds of other customers. If there's a bug or a misconfiguration in the vendor's software, your sensitive brief could accidentally be used to train a model, or, worse, show up in a result for a rival firm that just happens to be on the same server.
Wow. Okay, that's a very powerful and frankly terrifying analogy. So let's compare the two approaches more directly. A few key features.
Sure, think of it like a checklist. Does data leave your device? For
Mhm.
cloud AI, that's a big yes. For local-only AI, it's a definitive no.
And what about vendor access to my actual prompts?
With cloud, it's usually yes, they can access it. With local, it's a hard no. And that's a huge deal for anything proprietary or, just private thoughts.
Another one is the internet requirement. Cloud needs it, local doesn't. That opens up use cases for, say, a journalist in the field or someone on a long flight with no Wi-Fi.
Exactly. The need for constant connectivity just vanishes. And maybe the most critical point for businesses is compliance. Cloud AI means higher compliance risks because you're trusting the vendor. Local only means much lower risk because you control the entire data chain.
And lastly, customization. The big cloud models are sort of one size fits all, right?
Right, they can be pretty limited. But with local systems, you can highly customize them. You can fine-tune a model for a very specific task you need it for. It's a different level of control.
It really empowers you to treat the AI as just a tool, not a service provider who's constantly demanding your data as payment.
That's a great way to put it.
So, if listeners are convinced this is the way to go, how do they actually start? Because moving from a simple website to a self-hosted tool, that sounds like a complicated weekend project for a coder.
That's a fair point, and it used to be much harder. But the path has gotten a lot simpler. First, you just need to identify which of your AI tasks actually involve sensitive data. Not everything needs to be local.
Okay, focus on the high-risk stuff first. Then what? How do I actually get a model on my machine?
You'd select a lightweight, locally runnable model that fits your needs. The open source community has done amazing work here, creating optimized formats that are easier to install.
Like those GGUF files I've heard about.
Exactly like those. You can find them on places like Hugging Face. Then you just use an offline desktop app. There are a bunch of tools now that bundle everything together, so you just install the app and download the model you want.
I'm guessing securing that local environment is still really important, though. How do I stop one of these local apps from just phoning home with my data anyway?
You are absolutely right to ask that. The basic security steps are key. Keep your models in your system updated. But critically, you have to check for and disable outbound telemetry wherever you can.
Let's quickly define telemetry for everyone.
Sure, telemetry is just data about how you use the app. Usage stats, crash reports. If it's outbound, that means it's leaving your machine and going back to the developer.
Which defeats the whole purpose.
It defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah.
Not every local app is private by default, so you have to check the settings and maybe even use your firewall to block any suspicious outgoing connections and, just periodically check what data is being saved on your device itself.
Okay, that brings us to hardware. The big fear is you need a supercomputer. Is local AI just inherently slow? Do I need a monster graphics card, a GPU, just to summarize a document?
Not necessarily. Optimized models can run surprisingly fast on decent consumer hardware. If you have a modern laptop with, say, 16 gigs of RAM, you can handle a lot of this work really smoothly.
And the GPU?
Well, a GPU definitely helps. It speeds up complex tasks dramatically. But for common stuff summaries, note-taking, transcription, even a pretty powerful 7 billion parameter model can feel just as fast as the big cloud services.
Let's be realistic about the trade-offs, though. If I'm doing something genuinely complex, like writing a really nuanced piece of code, am I going to be held back by using a local model versus a giant one in the cloud?
That's the most important nuance. And yes, for now, the biggest cloud models, the ones with hundreds of billions of parameters, they often have slightly higher accuracy for those exceptionally complex reasoning tasks.
Yeah.
That's a trade-off you have to accept.
Right.
And heavy workloads will require strong hardware, so there's an initial cost there.
And since I'm in control, I'm also the one who has to handle the updates, right?
Correct. You have to manage the updates manually, though most tools now make that pretty simple. But the key takeaway is this. For, I'd say, 90% of your daily AI tasks, document analysis, summaries, brainstorming local AI performs extremely well, often instantaneously, without asking for any privacy trade-off at all.
That distinction is everything. It shows there's a really viable path here to keep your digital autonomy while still using this incredible new technology.
And it's interesting, if you look beyond just us as individuals, you see large organizations are already doing this. They're deploying local models on internal private servers precisely to meet strict security and compliance rules.
That brings up a fascinating thought for the future. If privacy and security are not just achievable, but are in fact being mandated for big companies, how will that eventually trickle down and shape consumer expectations?
Hmm.
If a corporation can get this done to be compliant, it really should become the standard we expect for ourselves, too.
It really is food for thought. The entire architecture of trust is being redefined as we speak.
Well, that wraps up our discussion on reclaiming control with local-only AI. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us.
Remember to like and subscribe to the program so you never miss another conversation about your digital world.
And as always, a quick disclaimer. This discussion was made with the assistance of AI.